tree. No tree blocking the view. All right.
Yeah, I think,
Okay, all right.
all right. I'm gonna start the meeting. Welcome, everybody, to the first board meeting. We have today as our guest from Delta Engineering, Michael Rose. We're gonna present the plans for and before we do that though, welcome members of the public. Does anybody have comments before we start? All right, and then we'll get to the rest of our wording after. So
we're in.
you're it. Thanks for coming.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, Gene. Thank you, everybody, for coming yourselves. And I know you've had kind of a preview of this with other graphics, but we figured we'd come in person, and it's going to be easier for questions and answers. So we just have a small agenda I handed out to you, just some bullet points to kind of keep us on track a little bit. I'm assuming we have what, 30 minutes,
Yeah.
an hour or so.
Yeah.
So we'll do our best to try to stay within that window, but feel free to catch us with some questions and answers. Again, I'm Michael Haas. I'm the Director of Landscape Architecture at Delta Engineers and Architects. And Rose Helmer is one of my associates. So we're both trained as landscape architects. And Rose has been with us for like a year and a half now. So it's been great having her. Very bright and very helpful, very creative. So I want to just kind of preface this that we've taken our design pretty far at this point. So we're really moving into our construction drawing phase based on our contract, but we've been kind of pacing ourselves in light of the fact that the funding isn't in hand yet. So we're hopeful that does come through and the project can progress. And there maybe we can weigh in on that, or Gene towards the end of our presentation. But why are we doing this in the first place? What was the purpose of this? And if you go back to some of the earlier studies and some of the discussions you had, and even the grant application, the intent was to provide better access to the lake. And you have lakefront park, obviously, but then there's a lot of restricted public access, other than maybe at the Fenimore Museum and certainly the golf course. But lakefront access is prime. And with Pioneer Street, the axis of Pioneer Street running from Main Street right down to the lake, and the fact that it runs downhill, so you always have a good kind of view or superior vantage point of the lake. The intent is to draw people, obviously, from the center of the village to the lake and give the public a place to, just to take in the view. The other thing is, there's kind of a river glass trail system, that's been kind of developed or is developing, and this could become another stop or node along that trail. But tourism is kind of critical, and it becomes a really nice element to have, other than the dead end of Pioneer Street at the lake. It's nice, but it's not the same. It doesn't give really a generous space for people to gather. So again, the intent here, what we were commissioned with, was try to create a really nice overlook, if you will, that gets people out over the water and can accommodate, a small family, or maybe a group of 12 or 15 or 20, adults and kids. For example, say you have a ball team, Little League from Iowa, or if you're at the Dream Field and they want to get a group picture, team picture, it's accommodating for something like that. You can have a decent gathering for photographs. But it's a small space still. We're trying to keep it intimate, so it's not too grand, so it still fits the context but it's appended to Lakefront Park. So we want to make sure it's very accessible as well. So tying in with the existing boardwalk system that's there now along the lakefront was kind of critical. So I want to kind of get into some of the elements of the space and of the design, because that's kind of where we're at. We're starting to really look and drill down into the details, if you will, of the overlook. So these are some of the original simulations that we provided, a year or so back. It gives you kind of what, the vantage point from Pioneer Street, what it looks like top down, very simple, classic arch shape, if you will, trying to pick up on some of the more the historic elements of the Lakefront Park. And then, what it would look like if you were in a drone looking at it over the water, that it does cantilever out somewhat over the lake, but it's not a pier or weir or a dock, if you will, that you would see normally in a marina. It's more of a cantilevered overlook, and that's what we're attempting to create. So as we get into the design of the space itself, we really simplified the arc. The width of that from end to end is, remind me again, Rose, was it 60?
The actual length of the arc is about 70
70
feet around the arc.
Yeah. But end to end is like 63 feet.
By like 19.
Yeah, at the widest point, and then maybe down to 15 at the narrower points. But then you're going to have a railing. There's going to be some seating. There'll be a seat wall, and then behind the seat wall, between the seat wall and Pioneer Street itself, will be a plant bed, fairly generous, probably another 15 feet or 18 feet wide. And then at the end of Pioneer Street, to allow for cars to make that U-turn, we decided that it would be better to pave it with like a brick paver versus just asphalt. The purpose of that is to get a little bit of a rumble strip, if you will. Okay, this is the end of the street. This is just a temporary space. We're not going to have people parking there. We want to kind of designate it still as semi pedestrian, if you will, type of space. But it also allows us to bring some of the brick into the space that is used throughout the village. So if you look at our cross section here on this board, you see that the existing seawall is here. So the cantilever comes out another 12 feet or so from that seawall. And the design of this structurally is that we're cantilevered. There's a stanchion or a pier that'll be under the deck up in here. But the seawall is not going to be touched. In other words, we're not bearing any of the weight of this on the wall itself. I believe that the DEC, the Army Corps, will appreciate that. Also allows, if need be, if there's any maintenance that needs to be done, to be able to get to that wall still. So we got a couple inches at least clearance. And the way we're doing that is the structure itself is going to be steel I-beams with wood joists wedged into the webbing of the beams, if you will. And our attempt here is to keep the profile very low from the top of that wall to the elevation of the street, so that we can still make the transition from the sidewalk to the deck universal. In other words, ADA accessible without a real steep ramp, if you will. It'll be a very gentle transition from the grade of the sidewalk, to the new construction. Likewise, the boardwalk, you can see in this view, we're able to intersect the boardwalk at grade coming in from along the lake shore, and the boardwalk is, extends out beyond Lakefront Park, but it provides, again, continuous access to that same level, if you will, of the deck.
That's one change from the schematic to this is meeting the 5% grade or less. We eliminated having a split access to access the boardwalk and then access the new ramp. And we were able to maintain ADA and connect the Trex boardwalk all the way back to there. There's like a node back here. So it's still a continuous loop from Lakefront Park. It just looks a sight.
Yeah, we basically simplified this kind of this wide connection, if you will, and really made it kind of cleaned up the, you know, the Trex is laid in a lot of different patterns towards the end here to create that intersection, and we're not going to have that now. We're able to peel some of that back, and it gives the opportunity to make a really simple connection here, you know, pretty direct access from the sidewalks. The lighting that we propose is a bollard style light fixture. Okay, it's a pedestrian light fixture that will stand 36 or 42 inches tall, depending on what kind of light pattern we get with it. The intent here is we don't want to have anything vertical. It's all about the view, right? So, you know, anything vertical in that view all of a sudden now becomes an object that could even break the horizon line between the distant hills and the sky. And we really want to keep the whole plane of this very simple, very flat, and even the railing is we'll touch on the railing here shortly, is transparent. But the lights are going to be of a style where we can get a downward cast of illumination, so you don't get a really bright fixture that catches your eye. It's going to be indirect lighting, okay? And they're going to be placed in such a way that, you know, at the transitions between the sidewalk and the deck, at the ends of the wall, over here, there's going to be space so that you get illumination maybe in about 15-foot radius from each of the lights, so that we'll have enough of an overlap, enough lighting to illuminate the ground plane, basically what you're walking on. And that's our intent. We're not trying to illuminate everything like a street light. We're trying to keep it subdued, if you will, so that, again, the view is not obstructed. So say at dusk, somebody's here, they want to still get a picture, you know, the sunset, you know, over the lake or whatever, the lights won't be affecting that view. The camera's going to really take in the, you know, scenery and not the lights. So we have a couple options that we're still looking at, some other manufacturers, but the sleek, slender design seems to be fitting in better with our railing design. As we start looking at what options we have available to us, again, originally the concept was to have fairly transparent railing system, you know, with some glass panels and some relief, if you will, on those glass panels that would be motifs that would be historic or indicative of Cooperstown. And those are up to you to provide us with some suggestions. I think originally we asked Eugene or Mayor, we asked you to provide us with some ideas. So we had, you know, a tree, we had a sailboat, obviously somebody swinging a baseball bat, we had the Cooperstown logo. You know, those are the kinds of simple graphics we'd like to have as a kind of an etched image on the glass panel. Okay, not on every one, it'll probably be on every other panel in the center of the rail. So the railing would be steel structure, and a post beam with the glass insets, and then the relief motifs on. We're showing only 5. I think there's going to be 7, right?
Yeah.
So 7 out of 18 or 20 panels in total will have the clear panels, and we could, depending on the budget, we could add more. You know, we have yet to determine the cost of this versus a traditional rail. But the good thing is, the manufacturer we found has worked really closely with us. They can do the connections because it's a radius, it's not a straight rail, it has a curve to it. They can actually provide the clips, right, to help us create, keep the panels within that radius. And the top rail is going to be much heavier, so it's going to be somewhere in the range of maybe 3.5 to 4 inches in diameter, round, easier to lean on, okay? And not very easy to sit on, to try to stand on, God forbid, right? And from a code standpoint, the railing is going to be, has to be 42 inches tall.
Right. And then the way we also have this design is that instead of the posts for the railing being mounted into the floor of the deck, they're gonna be mounted on the exterior, the fascia of the steel. That way you can really walk right up to the edge, but there's not really a gap in between the edge of the decking and where the post is, but you maximize your space on the deck. And it can be installed right against the steel on the edge, and it'll still get that height and have a more solid top rail. You can put your hand on it, but like Mike mentioned, you won't be able to climb up it and hang over it.
So one of our earlier meetings, we discussed, do we want a more temporary look or more historic look to the rail and some of the elements? And so we're trying to find that balance. And we feel that this railing, in its sleekness of the units, gives it a little contemporary flair. But if we paint it black, and we have more of a picket style fence, and the rest of the rail, more on the extreme edges here, I think we can solve that. We can have the best of both in a sense. Again, it kind of goes back to the lighting fixtures and keep the lighting simple. This fixture really matches the railing in its form and its shape quite nicely. And then we add in the furnishings, so if we go to black iron benches that are similar to what you see in Pioneer Park, for example, without the wood slats, we can easily match that up with the trash bins too. So now you got mostly black iron for all your metal elements within the overlook, and they all start to kind of work together. Much nicer appeal to the space. Doesn't look like the benches were an afterthought. We could go to the benches with the wood slats. They would work well here too, because our decking is proposed to be wood. Okay, and I know we talked about this before, but I got some samples here to pass around. So this is a thermally modified ash. Any of you have ash trees in your yard or out in your fields? Ash are being affected by the emerald ash borer, so it's been a really great product. We all know that baseball bats used to mostly be made out of ash in the earlier days. Now they make them out of, a lot of them are out of maple, but ash is still preferred because it's a hard, dense wood. And the product is now readily available. They're cutting ash trees down like you can't believe. And about 10 or 15 years ago, they decided, let's create a new market to go, to beat back like the pressure treated lumber and all the synthetic lumbers, the Trex and the Timber Tech, the plastic woods, that if you go price those out, they're pretty expensive. The ash is actually has a better price point per board foot because the way they designed this has very little waste. You can see it's a tongue and groove type system, so the clip fasteners are hidden. Okay, so you don't see any nail marks or screws through the wood itself. It's all screwed down on the sides or in the perimeter of the wood, and it also holds up. So this is what it will gray out to, similar like cedar. Okay, on the back side of that sample. or it could be treated with an oil or a stain, if you want to keep the darker tone to it, that dark brown tone that you see in those samples on the table. But it's a very sustainable product. It's very easily to get it locally, so shipping is not an issue. You can reduce the cost because they're not shipping it from the south or from the Midwest. It's produced here, in the state, which is great. And I've had success with it for about 10 years now. And I've been back to some of those original projects, and it looks great. Very little checking. Mitch can tell you what is checking. Well, it's when your treated lumber deck starts to dry out, it splits, right? You get these little creases in both the posts and in the decking. This has very little checking. The wood will not split the way pressure treated wood does. So therefore, you don't get very much splintering from it as it dries out over time. And they give you a warranty. You get a warranty up to 40 years with this product, especially if it's not in touch with the ground, which it won't be in this case. It'll be suspended. We feel this is a really good product, very dense, very similar to like your Ipays, your tropical lumbers, that come out of South America or the rainforest. That are beautiful, real dense, have a kind of mahogany look to them. But again, the cost of those are really high. And this has similar qualities to those types of tropical hardwoods. What else do we want to talk about relative to those? For thicker boards, that's what we're looking at. The profile, not this thinner one over here. I just have a couple different samples. So that one is, I want to say it's a 5/4, and it's cross section, so it's going to be obviously a lot heavier, a lot more durable. The other thing is they can also miter the ends with the narrow ends, so that these kind of connect just like a hardwood floor. You don't have to have it fastened at a joist. Where it connects to another, the adjacent board on the long axis, there's a structural system that's already built into the way the wood is made. So we could lay it like a hardwood floor, or we could lay it kind of like we show on the diagrams here, in parallel boards like we would traditionally lay a deck. Either way, the design is such that we're able to maximize the material so we don't have a lot of waste. And that's a good thing. The curbing, the curves that are already on Pioneer Street or granite curves, we're going to basically repeat that curve along basically the end of the street. So that again, there's a little bit of a vertical edge there. It's going to be helpful for snow removal, plowing and pushing into the plant bed, for example. At least you have an edge to catch in that at that point. Drainage is a concern, right, Rose? And so one of the solutions we have here was that there are 2 catch basins at the end of Pioneer Street, and it's basically right in the curved face. So the one that's over here, we're going to keep it, and we're going to put a slightly different grate on it so that it'll have more like a trash rack. It won't be a flat grate. It'll have a little bit of a rise to it, so that this time of year when you get a lot of leaf litter that accumulates pretty quickly, that you get these still heavy rains, that the leaf litter will still build up around the perimeter, but the water can still get in the kind of the dome shape of the grate. And that's going to be in the plant bed. Okay, you want to keep it so you have visual access to it, physical access to it. The other one is actually under this section of the deck. So we're actually proposing to put in another drainage structure here, just a precast catch basin with a grade, so you have visual access and physical access to the one that will be under the deck here. This is something I want to talk to Mitch about a little bit more, that if we need to remove a section of the deck, it's gonna be hard because you still have the joist there. But we're gonna take a closer look at that to see, can we have a section that can actually be removed for whatever reason, if you needed to get a, hose in there to pump it out on occasion. You have a problem with these accumulating a lot of debris and leaf litter.
No,
the maintenance ones. Yeah, because I think this probably flows right into the lake, yes, right? So, I think we'll be okay with what we propose. This way, this structure will catch the majority of any of the bigger debris and allow you to remove those sediments, whereas basically save the other one from any kind of maintenance.
Yeah.
We still maintain the existing envelope.
Okay, so we touched on the paving material for the deck. The paving here, I have some samples of the brick also. This isn't exactly what we would be proposing, but this is similar. This is actually a pervious paver, so I think we use these up on Main Street. So they got the kind of the lugs on the ends of them. But we're looking at a kind of a brick paver that'll be kind of a cobble-like. So it'll have more of a tumbled look. This is very rigid and formal. The tumbled pavers tend to knock off a lot of corners and edges. Think of the old-fashioned streets, the original brick paved streets. They actually have a manufacturer that has made a business in salvaging all of those old brick streets. Every time they peel them up in the old trolley tracks and whatnot, and they've created stockpiles of these pavers. So we've asked for a couple samples to be sent to us so that you can see they're bigger than your standard brick. But pervious paver obviously is more readily available in the clay brick, and that's what we use in Pioneer Park as well. And that's what you see up on the sidewalk of Main Street. So either or, we just want to make sure we got the cross section that could be driven on with both vehicles and trucks, even plows, so that the brick is going to hold up. The good thing about brick is they've made it a lot denser now, so we can get enough of a strength. The PSIs are strong enough that you can drive on. Which is great, and I think we would prefer to go with brick versus a concrete paver in this location. Oh yeah, seat wall. Okay. So seat wall, creates a nice edge. Obviously, we got a little bit of grade change from the street down to the boardwalk. So we're trying to pick up a little of that grade with a wall, like a little retaining wall. We're making it just high enough so you can sit on it. We have additional seating on the wall. We're adding a few benches, and because at least the bench gives you a little bit of comfort in the back to it. You can stay and linger a little longer. It's a lot more comfortable to sit on a bench than on a stone wall. The seat wall, we have a bluestone cap to it, and the cap will have more of a textured. So it's what they call a thermal surface. A little bit of texture to it. And at the front of it, we have more of a rock face, chisel face to it. The whole front edge of the stone wall itself. That would be the exposed edge. They're going to be substantial. They're going to be a couple inches thick. So the cap of that wall looks sturdy. you know, because obviously people are gonna stand on it, do it, walk on it, whatever. Putting the benches in front of it, you know, deters the skateboarders. That's a, you know, that's a must. You gotta do something like that to keep the skateboarders off of it. And then the rest of the wall is that cap basically cantilevers out. The face of the wall is going to be a veneer, if you will. So it'll be large and small, skinny, fat, long pieces, a variety of pieces. That'll give you, in that same round base. And cap will be, but they'll have joints between them. But it's just a good way to finish off the face of the wall.
It'll be similar to the pavilion or the overlap. Here's a picture.
Yeah,
of
it's a good
what's going
example.
in.
I'm sorry, similar to what?
Over at Lake
Bandstand.
Park, the band.
Oh, the bandstand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like,
The cantilever of the cap, we have two options. We can put lights recessed in the wall like these are here. But if we put, today, the LEDs are so small, we can get a light strip that's about 5 or 6 inches wide. And we can get them mounted under the cap. Beauty of that, again, it's all indirect lighting. Kind of shows off the texture of stone. Illuminates the pavement. So we talked about the bollard lights before, we got them on the ends, but we kind of we're going to lose a little bit of that light overlap in the middle. So put a few of these along the wall, they'll help kind of fill in this area that'll get most of the traffic. It wouldn't be a continuous band of light like this. It would be, you know, incidental maybe here. So it's just enough again, just to give us some illumination on the pavement, onto the deck. Amenities, Rose, you want to touch on those a little bit more?
Talked about the bench attraction. I want to touch on the planting. One of the things that we tried to do was to really take note of the existing plantings now, the work that went into all the plantings down the Trex boardwalk and that are currently residing in the states that we're going to replace with the deck. So I took note of some of the signage that talked about the buffer strip and pollinators and tried to keep that same theme within this plant bed by mixing in. Nothing here is really over 4 to 5 feet tall. Trying to limit there being any trees to maintain that view as it angles up slightly to the lake. So there's some mixed box with perennials, so you'll get the evergreen and winter interest as well as perennials for pollinators. And these are all hardy to our zone. They can handle wind. And so I think this would be a great complement to the already existing plantings that are there, as well as if we could most likely borrow some of those plantings that we are going to be putting over the deck is. We can take some of those, transplant them, like reduces costs. A few of the existing plants were, I noticed, a little tall, so we wanted to come back from that a little bit. There's the 9-bark that got quite tall. I was here on Monday 1 week. Months ago, and it was full. Every single bench had a person on it. The one bench was behind the 9-bark, and it kind of scared me because I didn't realize there was someone sitting there. But so we want to limit that height, but maintain all the existing plant patterns.
Features, I'd like to get that input from you at some point in time, so that, actually, this manufacturer can actually etch them into the glass. I was thinking that we could use, a vinyl applique. You can see it, I didn't look, some storefronts actually use it on their windows, to put lettering and images. it's amazing what they can do with vinyl, and it looks just like frosted or etched glass. The beauty of it is it can easily apply, and it could be removed. Now, want to change those images. Vinyl gives you a little bit more flexibility to do that. And they're real durable. I mean, you can't pick at it and try to peel it off yourself. You have to have a tool. But once we get it priced out, we'll kind of see which is going to be more reasonable solution.
Yeah, the great thing about the manufacturer we have in mind is that they can do everything that we're proposing and have it ready to be assembled. So it wouldn't be ordering the posts from one manufacturer and then you need the glass panel and then you need the clips. They do it all. So even if we did go the route of the etching, they are capable of that with the etching. So everything would kind of be an all-in-one.
So moving forward, we're in a position where advance the drawings to 100%. Basically, we're like at 90% right now, and then working primarily on our bid documents. If we're going to put it out to bids, so if we get the grant, say New York State Parks comes through. Our protection fund. They have certain standards that we have to abide by in the procurement process. So it has to be big competitive, it has to be advertised in the newspaper, and the whole protocol. We give it a minimum of 30 days. It's going to be minority contractor clauses in there, so any contractors that bid this project would have to at least share upwards of 30% of the work with minority or women businesses. And so those are all the stipulations, unfortunately. There's a lot of strings attached. We're going after a couple $100,000 from the state. The state's very good at facilitating it once you do get the grant and finalize the contract. Yes.
I just wanted to say a little something because I think in the community, there's been a little bit of a misconception about this project. So I just wanted to make sure everybody, particularly on the Parks Board, is up to speed. Basically, I applied in July 2018 for a CFA, Consolidated Funding Application to Parks, to go forward with this. This was something that was in our comp plan to provide greater visual access to Lake Otsego, particularly for non-motorboats. We feel like we have motorboat docks, we have kayaks, but people who just want to have scenic enjoyment at that spot are limited. So this was very much a growth of our 2016 comp plan. So that application went in July 2018, and we were notified about the middle of December 2018 that we had received this award, and it's about $30,000 for this planning project, which Michael has undertaken. And we didn't give much background on him, but he is the visionary behind the amphitheater at the Fenimore, and as well as redesign of the Farmers Museum entrance, etc. So we were familiar with his work and his work working along the lake. And when we came to do the village-funded renovation of Pioneer Park, we utilized Michael and his firm, and to great success. That the renovation of Pioneer Park has been quite successful. So we were notified in December 2018, but as you can imagine, by the time you jump through every MWBE hurdle, get all your ducks in a row, it was almost at the end of 2019, January 2020, that we knew we could move forward. We began some design work. And then unfortunately with the pandemic, the Parks Board has not been meeting, but I do believe you did have there was plans shared at an earlier Parks Board meeting. So at this point, we're hoping to finally wrap up this planning stage. And because everything takes a long time, I did put in for a July 2021 CFA, again, to the parks, to utilize these drawings. Obviously, they weren't finalized at that point, but you just have to get the ball rolling or it will never sort of occur. But that was sort of the background on it.
And that's a good point, because when you're going after these grants, they're pretty competitive, especially the parks grants, where every municipality has parks, and they don't have enough money to pay for major upgrades or improvements to the park. Whatever these park grants, the one feather in your cap essentially is that you have plans that'll show, one, your commitment to the project, because you actually want on a list create these drawings, and it shows the state that you pretty much have a shovel-ready project, so that you're not, it's not going to take 3 years or 4 years to implement. You can get the money, you could move, get it out on the street, get it out to bid, conceivably have this even finished by next year, by fall next year, if everything falls in place and ideally schedule fits appropriately for the grant and so on. So I think you're in a good spot, because the state's familiar with it, that we're going through this process now, we keep them informed, and then two, obviously they now have the grant application in hand to review it. So I don't know how many other grants, similar grants are chased, in this region, but may not have a lot of competition too, which COVID kind of slowed down a lot of projects. Hoping that that's when we receive this application. Typically, they're announced late December, early January. Cuomo was office, he used it as a real caveat. Sometimes they try to move them up and announce them on a big election year, earlier in October or November. But Governor, I'm sure she'll have some sort of big unveiling when she does announce the award. It's all tied to that consolidated funding applications, all tied to all the different regions of the state. But permits are another thing. We know we have to get probably a joint permit with the DC Corps, Article 15 permit to put the piers in the water near the shoreline. The good thing is it's real shallow, so disturbance to lakes are very minimal. The contractors will have to put up a coffer dam, de-water that section of the lake that they're holding back, so that they can get the footings in. And so it'll be a minor disturbance during construction. But we still have to notify the DEC and the Army Corps. Feedback we'll get from our environmental people are that the Army Corps is federal and they're just slow to begin with, but permit process that has been slowed a bit in COVID. So we really want to get a jump on that. It may take upwards of 6 months to get our permit. Thinking ahead, if we want to get to some construction by next summer, for example, we really need to initiate our site visit, see on site, scope it out. Plus, it'd be better to do it before the winter too. Get them out here where they can see the site, understand our goals, what's happening. So that's something we have to talk to you and to the mayor about. How far do you want us to push the permits? We can have everything ready to go, and then ship out the permits as soon as we get the grant application, or we can even jump that, get them out, knowing it's going to take a month or two before they respond to us, and at least get a jump on that process. that's kind of the one thing that holds up the process of construction. And we want to try to push to have have this built out, August, September. So schedule wise, again, we have our plans to finish, the permits, the process, and then once funding is in place, you get the award, but it may take 2 months before you actually get the physical contract with New York State Parks. And review it and sign it, that pretty much guarantees they're going to pay you, reimburse you for those funds. And I think, Mayor, I would think it's a reimbursable grant, so you have to pay out funds to the contractor, prove it to the state that you paid the contractor along the way, and then they reimburse you for those funds, correct?
Most of these, the village has to fund up front and then gets reimbursed with the grant, unfortunately. But that's the way this one is working as well, the planning component. Unfortunately, there was a certain change in our demographics, and though we qualified for 75-25 funding, 75 grant funding, 25 us on the planning, it's a 50-50 on a construction. So the village would be funding half of it anyway, long term.
Yeah, that's tough. With demographics change, and 5% of it is.
So as Michael said, I think we were just looking to make sure we had something that was moving forward. To me, the one area that needs more reflection and input, I think particularly from the public and from the Parks Board, is the panels and the signage. I was just recently in Great Barrington, Mass, which is where W.E.B. Du Bois was born, and there's a lot of great signage along a nature trail there about that. And there's graphics, pretty graphics are one thing, but people always say, why is that tower out there? It would be great, maybe one of those visuals on the panel is Kingfisher Tower, give a little history on it in some sort of panel. I see it as more historically linked as well to all the elements of the village. I know that destination marketing is about Seco County is going to be emphasizing in 2 years Cooper, simply because it's a particular anniversary of a publication, and he's one of the troublesome earlier people that not all his beliefs are what we would want today, but his daughter, Susan Fenimore Cooper, was a great conservationist, and her book, Rural Hours, there could be some really wonderful imagery or information from that on there to link to our Cooper heritage here. So that is an element that I think would be great to kind of explore, develop further on this overlook.
Yeah, Will Walker is currently working with his graduate students on signage about Native Americans in the area too. And if you worked on the amphitheater, I was just thinking the Three Sisters imagery that you used in the amphitheater would be a good panel too, with, which we could use to work in something about, Native Americans in the area.
Yeah, this doesn't lend itself, I think, well to professing more of the history as opposed to additional descriptions of the planting, bumper strip and so on. Those are pretty well covered in the existing panel. So if we're to do like an interpretive sign similar to what's there now we have to think hard where we're going to put that. Because maybe we don't want it right on the railing because then it becomes an obstruction for the two. It might be better to kind of lift it off to the side.
It doesn't matter.
Or if the motifs are built into the glass panels, maybe there's just a much smaller description that could on the railing that's not construction.
When it comes to the plantings, I think we've all heard years of complaints about those becoming overgrown and unruly, so I think less is more.
Mhm.
In fact, the Lincoln Valley Garden Club is talking about wanting to review the whole upper strip.
Oh, okay.
And we would definitely want to coordinate.
Sure, yeah, keep us tuned in.
I was talking about the design, it's all of the lighting, which how much lighting is in the park at night anyway? Like what's lit up?
Whatever the streetlights light up.
So nothing within the park itself. Like, I'm wondering if that much lighting is even necessary. Most of our parks close at dark. And this is, if we're looking at this as part of Lakefront Park, I'm not quite sure that pedestrian lighting is a top priority. I'm thinking of the new parking lot that they put in at Walnut Street, and they have those style lights that supposedly shed light down, but they're going up a hill, and they're so obvious and not very attractive, I don't think, in that location.
Could be a light.
Yeah, so I just said, you may not need to worry so much about lighting.
With LEDs too, we could easily have a system where they cut them basically to
They fade out at midnight.
50%, and yeah, for a certain height.
Or anytime, yeah, especially this time of year, because it does get darker before you're even out of work, so like, off 8 PM, I'm not really sure. what
Okay, as long as they could do that, yeah. We need to be illuminating the end of Pioneer Street. I don't think that would fly very well.
Has there been any thought or discussion about the village replacing the current boardwalk with more of a coordinated?
Yeah, I like the action.
The truck, same material.
Yeah, slippery.
Right now, yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to-
Very similar to like that, something. Any kind of precipitation and it's,
Consider it.
I'd love to see that.
Be nice to coordinate.
Yeah.
I just have one comment opinion wise.
Yeah.
I don't, and this is just a gut thing, I don't love the clip art either, the idea of having it attached to glass. I just think it could be fine, just be simple and pure, and if that's a money savings thing. The baseball players and the Southwoods and stuff, doesn't seem necessary to use this one. And I even like the idea of just a real railing, real fencing and not even glass, but maybe it's nice to see through it. And then the signage, if there was going to be some sort of explaining area or something, I see it as sort of, when you approach it on that brick arch, maybe it's placed low in the garden right there initially. And so you approach it, you can read, you're sort of in a good spot there, and then you go engage the lake. You come around and engage the lake after you've taken that in. Yep. And I kind of agree with what because it would be the only thing sort of glowing in that park.
Right. Very nice.
A couple of things, mostly towards operation and maintenance. The brick arch, isn't that the snow shelf in the winter? And will that?
Yeah, they'll have snow on it. There's gonna be a curb on the backside of the brick, so we can just stop plowing there. It's like we normally do now.
Okay. And then getting back to the plantings, it seems to me they are going to be problematic as a maintenance matter. And with the boulders staying there, could that just be a grassy area where little kids could toddle around while the grown-ups are?
This area here,
Yeah,
I think. I mean, Lakefront Park right next door.
right, kitchen. Okay, and then the question about the stone, is this manufactured stone or native stone that you're going to be using?
The blue stone?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's native stone for the southern tier.
And how about the your stone?
Yeah, it would also be blue stone. Cavern. Won't be the same stone.
Anybody else have questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Exciting.
You're welcome.
board meetings, is that right? Board
Yep.
meetings?
We don't know. Yeah, that's kind of one of our next steps too. We had to run some preliminary notes for the grant application.
In the ice, you have the ice, you can't push the concrete here or anything about it all.
No, we want to. Yeah, shallow area. We'll freeze off. We had this. The wall was.
Oh, I see.
You know, it's, I think 10 years or so, the lake kind of floods and that's the whole front.
Thank you.
Structural.